has no authority, independent authority, to prosecute these people. Ultimately, that decision is made by ICE or the Department of Justice. So that's kind of where I'd like to leave it off and let our sheriffs tell us, this is, I'm a lawyer, and most of everybody here is lawyers, and I'm still having trouble trying to digest how this plays out. So I know that we have two of the brightest minds here in law enforcement in the area, so I'm very excited about what they think. Sheriff Mack, you want to start first, and then Sheriff Cochran, you can go and do it.
I'll be brief. The Sheriff Mack probably got lots of information for you. I think Matt did a great job of illustrating and painting the picture of where we all are at in this. And it's basically, we've come full circle. The law was passed, we're right back before the law ever got passed. Law enforcement has always been prevented from racially profiling and stopping people without a lawful stop and all like that. But the law, all it has done is just revisited that. It says we can lawfully, if we lawfully stop somebody, it requires us to inquire of their status if they don't have a driver's license, or if we have them legally in custody or legally under a stop for some other reason, we can further investigate their unlawful status, illegal immigration status. But from that point on, we can't arrest them. All we can do is call ICE or call Border Patrol. They'll run a check on him, and they'll come get them from us. And then physically what they do, generally, they'll either take them to New Orleans, where they have the deportation hearings set for them, or I think they take them to Sheriff Mack's jail and hold them until they get a few of them ready to load up and go to New Orleans. When they get there, they go before a hearing. If they waive their right to be in this country, or say, yeah, I admit that I'm not here legally, they go ahead and deport them. If they want to claim that they're here legally, then they have a hearing. But the ICE agents, that's what it tells us, just that quick, boom, take them to the border, and then, of course, many of them come back, as you well know, time and time and time again. Everything else, the other issue about the law requires law enforcement, sort of puts a burden on us to do it. I think that survived that challenge, but it just has taken the ability of us to really do much with immigration at all, as so vividly illustrated. Maybe I'd come back to this later, but personally, what are the challenges for us is that, yeah, we can't do nothing about it really and truly as a state or state officers without the support of the federal government, and they've just failed miserably over the years. Now, I will tell you that they are doing more than what they did just 3 or 4 years ago as far as picking them up better and moving them out and stuff like that. And I would say that the law did have some effect in that self-deportation. We certainly saw a lot of that. We could recognize that. We could recognize it on the highways and on the interstates that we monitor about people coming and going and stuff such as that. We saw it. Now, of course, if you read, a lot of that has now started changing. Many people that left are coming back illegally. But what we also are seeing, because of the requirements of getting a driver's license, apparently North Carolina must have a pretty easy state to get a driver's license. Because, the burden is put on the driver's license people. They have to have, all the proper identification and stuff like that. Apparently North Carolina is an easy place to pass all that, because we see a lot of illegals that have North Carolina driver's licenses, and then a lot with Baldwin County tags. Of course, the tags aren't the name. That's what my people tell me, is they come through here, they hit North Carolina, and then they go get a car in Baldwin County until they're stopped or whatever. But Alabama, they require a lot of the information before they get that driver's license. But once you get that driver's license, that's their passage, unless there's something that causes a discovery that they're illegal. But, everything, the way it's designed, is to be based upon that driver's license. And Alabama, I think, at least claim that they've got a pretty good process maybe as far as not letting illegals get driver's license improperly and stuff like that. Other concerns as far as illegal immigration, there's a whole different area of concern out there as it relates to the Mexican drug cartels and the impact that we have so many illegal Mexicans in the country and stuff like that. When they come to Mexico, I know there's more than just Mexicans illegally, but the drug cartels have a tremendous reach into our country already. They're in over 325 cities, and their ability to blackmail and do other stuff with illegals and have an impact on that is a concern to me. And lots of others. So with that, I want Sheriff Mack to come up.
Been in law enforcement now for 28 years, and one of the things that what made this piece of legislation and ultimately what's happened since it very unique is for years and years and years and years and years, as long as I've been in law enforcement, when the federal government realized that it didn't have all the necessary resources at the local level to address a federal program, what they did is they formed a task force. Okay? Blue Lightning Task Force, that was customs and immigration. I was on that. I used to sit out here at the state docks, and we would inspect Chinese ships coming in that were selling illegal goods off the ships. Okay? DEA has had multi-jurisdictional task forces where local officers are deputized and put them into the federal court system. Okay? Using local resources. FBI, Major Crimes Violence Task Force, has utilized local officers to go out and enforce street-level crimes, looking for the big heavy hitters to put them in the federal court system. This whole immigration thing deviated away from that. And, you know, it was a situation where I agree the federal government was very lax in what they were doing as far as addressing the problem. And I think that was what our legislature and what they were hearing was that the state of Alabama has to step up and do something to address this problem. One of the unique things about this law, and you know, I'll give the standard disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer, okay? But I've had to read more law as it relates to this case than I have any other law in my entire career. This has been my work. This is my desk reference guide to this law, okay? This contains the court's opinions. This contains the modifications and amendments to the law as it worked its way through the legislature. And several other items. And so what it's done is it's forced law enforcement to have to get more involved in this. And we were dealing with an area of law we weren't trained to deal with. We weren't trained to determine immigration status and things of that nature. So, but one of the things Alabama law did, what most people fail to understand, is there was just as much in that telling you what you couldn't do as what you could do. You know, the law specifically stated you can't make a stop based upon the color of their skin or the speech of their mouth. The law specifically prohibited certain things that were provided that you could not do, and it laid out a pattern for what happened. Now, I'm a firm believer that the immigration thing is a federal issue. I'm also a firm believer that the states have the right to enact legislation as long as it, you know, does not superintend and it was a great review for me to go back all over the Supremacy Clause issues and everything else is laid out, but that the states would have the right to protect themselves. I agree with Sheriff Cochran. We're doing the same thing we've always done now. With what the 11th Circuit had ruled, based upon, I think, in somewhat connection with what the Supreme Court did. Essentially what happens is if we arrest somebody on a criminal charge, forget immigration, if they're arrested on a criminal charge and they come to our jail and we suspect them to be illegal, they're going to be checked through ICE. Typically, if ICE has a suspicion, they will come and do an interview within 48 hours. They'll put a detainer for hold, which essentially is whether they're going to make a decision to adopt the case. What we were seeing and where the system has really failed is we had people that were being convicted of crimes that were not being deported. They were refusing jurisdiction in a lot of the cases. If it was a felony, if they're a repeat offender, things of that nature, they may go ahead and adopt that case and do something with it. I guess the other thing that I will say, what's made it difficult for law enforcement is that this kind of was thrust upon us, and so, okay, now we've got a law that we're going to enforce. Well, then the federal government came in, and they essentially wanted to make law enforcement the villain in this case. We were in a meeting right here in Mobile. There's a United States Deputy Attorney General. I'm told he's the number 3 man under Eric Holder. He's head of their Civil Rights Division. His last name is Perez. He came down, Sheriff Cochran and I were literally sitting across the deal from him, and basically threatened us. And threatened local law enforcement. And said, and in his exact statement, he said, we know that law enforcement is keeping children from entering the schoolhouses in the state of Alabama because of this bill. We know your officers are conducting roadblocks and taking people into custody on immigration. We said, Tell us. Where's this occurring? What county is this occurring in? Because it sure ain't happening in Mobile and Baldwin County. Well, I can't tell you that. It's under investigation. This was followed by a letter that basically came out of the Department of Justice by Assistant U.S. Attorney Perez that said, by the way, we realize that there's some civil rights issues and everything in Alabama, and has been some of the history of this, and if you choose to enforce this law, understand that we can withhold federal funding. Okay? So we were tagged with probably the removal of federal grants and everything else. All while all we were saying was, if I don't know of any law enforcement officer that, if the legislature passes a law, we're going to enforce the law. I mean, that's what we raise the right hand and swear to do when we take our oath. Okay? And, that's what we got to do. But then they came in and did this, even to the point now, the most recently, is we had started getting some feedback out of Director Napolitano's office through Homeland Security that there may even be a delayed process in removing some of these people.
Once you got to go then? You can't keep them, right, if there's a delayed process.
Yeah, and then this was even the ones that had actually even been
convicted?
Well, they had issued a detainer.
Oh, okay.
And that we would hold them. We haven't seen that. I think there'll be an article in Mobile Press Register tomorrow. They just recently did a sweep over the past few weeks, and what that is just what was described earlier, where these are people that they reviewed their status, they went and issued federal warrants on them, they went out and picked them up. I think they've listed about 38, about half of them are in my jail right now because I am a designated ICE detention facility. And I'll hold them until they take them to Atlanta. Some go to Talladega, but most of the time they go to Atlanta for their final detention. So we are back to where we were. The only provision in the Alabama law is on that situation if they don't have a driver's license. And the question, Matt, being the attorney he is, tell me about this detention. How long are y'all holding detention and everything? Because we're very concerned about that, getting into an illegal detention, which of course, as you well know, can lead to some civil rights issues and can cause you some grief down the road. For me, my officers, if we're doing that, we essentially are following the Terry stop rule. I mean, we're essentially about 20 minutes, okay, if it's nothing. And what do? We let them go. I mean, we document them, who they are, what they are, and everything else. Now, for most of the time, that's not been a big issue with us because we've got either reason to arrest them on a charge, we've got a reasonable thing that we're there. We're not just checking immigration. And that was the thing that really was the misinformation out there about this was that, I'll never forget when it came in, I had a principal of an elementary school come and said, "Sheriff, are you going to come arrest my bus drivers today because they might have an illegal kid on the bus?" My answer was, "Hell no." No, we're not going to do that. I mean, that was just, and a lot of this was being fueled. Last thing I'll say is I do sit on the national committee with this. And of the national committee, about half that national committee are Arizona sheriffs. And we actually call them border sheriffs because they are sheriffs on the border. They are. And folks, I'll just go ahead and tell you, it is a war. I mean, you have sheriff's offices out there that have tactical teams that are on routine patrols in tactical gear, manning them. The president can say all this stuff. If there's more boots on the Arizona border, that's the reason is because it's sheriff's deputies and police officers that are filling those boots. And that's what I'm getting from the sheriffs out there. There are officers being shot at. There are officers being killed. And so that's why this issue's become so passionate for Arizona. One of the cases that's coming up right now, everybody's familiar with, of course, Fast and Furious and the situation that happened out there. But there was also a rancher that was out there, just a John Q. Public, normal guy, citizen that had a farm. And he essentially was riding his fence, checking his areas out there. And some illegals had border crossed illegally, had come across, they had murdered him. And then, realizing they had committed a murder in the United States of America, crossed the border back into Florida to seek immunity for being extradited to come back, and just a whole big issue that they had there. So that's the passions that are coming from Arizona on that. The Supreme Court ruling did not go the way that most sheriffs and law enforcement thought it would go. We were in that meeting in July, right before the Supreme Court issued it. We thought the number was right, but we thought the opinion was going to be different as far as the majority versus the dissent. But it wasn't, and that's kind of where we are. So today, I agree with Sheriff Cochran, we're really just doing things about like we were a few years ago, maybe with a couple of modifications. And it's not the locals. You know, I think that they're trying to do the best they can. This is an administration decision policy issue that's being called from Washington, is why we're seeing a lot of this distinction as far as the backup and the issues that we're having with it.
Questions for our speakers? I have one. Let me ask you this. Say somebody, after somebody's cleared, someone who is I say cleared, that they're not committing any crime, you stop them for speeding, you write them a ticket, they don't have a driver's license, and you can't determine their alienage. And under the Alabama statute, my understanding is y'all can detain him pending his immigration status. How long can we hold him? And is there a certain amount of time, or is it just we governed by the Fourth Amendment? How long does ICE, there's a database, is it not, that y'all submit the name to, and you run it, and it takes anywhere from 10 to, well, the government said it takes, is it 60, and in the argument in the Supreme Court, they say you have to wait in a queue for 60 minutes before your name comes up, and then once they run your name, after the 60 minutes, it takes 10 minutes. Is that about right? Is that how y'all...
Fortunately for us on this side, we've got a Border Patrol agent that's working with us.
Okay.
And he's able to access that kind of quicker or better, but it's kind of ironic. They run it against a database. Well, the database is a database that's previously identified illegals. Otherwise, how do you know they're illegal when you run against the database? It sort of begs that question, because they've already determined that individual is illegal because he's been caught and proved to be illegal previously. If it was a first-timer, it wouldn't be in a database, would it? Because he's never been here before.
Right.
So it's sort of the dichotomy you got there. But they're running, we kind of, as Sheriff Mack said, we really follow that Terry stop thing, you know, a reasonable time to keep them as long as we can articulate, or if we're checking with an ICE agent or something like that. But again, most of the instances we have, there's already a reason to arrest them, and when they get to jail, then they'll notify ICE, they'll put a detainer on them, and when we know when they're going to be released from jail, either the charges are dismissed or they serve time or whatever, we're to notify them up to 30 days in advance, or as soon as we know when they'll be released. And then their order to us is, if you don't hear from us, don't hold him for more than 48 hours. Now, also in that order, it says you should get a call back, call us and let us know. But if you don't get a call back within 30 minutes, then call this agent before you release them within 30 minutes. Now, a lot of times at the jail, when they know somebody's illegal, they'll say, would you put them on the phone with us, and they'll have a conversation with the illegal and I guess make a determination they're illegal, and then they'll tell our people, okay, we want to go ahead and issue a detainer. So some of them, enforcement by phone, I guess you'd say, but it works.
Are there any violent, you mentioned some cases, are there any violent felon convicts after they've served out their state sentence that ICE refused to take?
Not that I'm aware of. Of course, one of the issues in
or sex offenders or something, you know, it's kind of heinous offense.
They, to my knowledge, they're taking them, but this is kind of the, and I know we've got judges in the room, but this just goes to show you how they somewhat divert the problem. If they're convicted of a felony and a judge sentences them to 10 years in prison, they let them serve, let the state pay their prison time, they keep them in prison. They're only going to take custody of them, they don't defer that. So that's why a lot of times our judges will either, split the sentence or whatever if they can get that immigration hold, and if immigration will do it. So I think they are deporting those, but once again, it's only after they've been totally adjudicated and totally done their time, whatever time they've been sentenced to in the state system. So I know one guy that we had a rapist in Baldwin County, and I think that he was, it ended up coming down to I believe a rape second charge. The judge, I think, gave maybe a 10, 12-year sentence on that, and he did serve about 7 years, and after that 7 years, then they called him up. Department of Corrections, same thing with us, is what Sheriff's saying. They'll notify ICE and say, we're about to release this individual. Do you want him? Yeah, we want him now that he's been in your state, serving the sentence, and we'll now take him and now we'll deport him.
Sheriff Mack, you were relating a story about the rancher who was shot on the Texas border, and you said they crossed the border into Florida to get immunity. Do you mean Mexico, or is this?
I'm sorry, it would have been Mexico.
Yeah, I
I'm
guess you
sorry.
meant that. I just wondered if they came to Florida and there was some kind of special immunity.
No.
That's a different country.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I'm
a
sorry, it
pretty,
was Mexico.
pretty long trip. Yeah, I thought it was.
One other issue you may find interesting, that kind of, I call it a little bit of a sham that happened about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. You may recall that ICE or Border Patrol back then trained some Alabama State troopers. Supposedly gave them the federal training and all like that, and they were going to teach them how to do that, and then they could do the thing. I checked into that, and they never, not one time, did they actually, the trooper, handle the case himself, arrest the guy, and deport him or whatever. It never happened. And the troopers will tell you that. They will now think. But at the time, you may remember Senator Sessions kept asking, how many cases have y'all handled? Because he was big on that. They never went after, oh, we don't have the statistics, we don't have this. They just gave them. But every time, all they could do was turn it over to a federal officer, and then they would process the paperwork. So even giving them 28 troopers or whatever it was at the time, specially trained to help, they didn't want the help, they refused it, and it's all from that, up to the administration.
The troopers tell me that they really can't hold them. They take them and drop them off either at your jail or sometimes drop them off somewhere else. And if they don't have enough of them, the ICE won't come pick them up. Is that right?
It depends. A lot of it goes to the interview process. What the sheriff's referring to is with the 287G program. And this is interesting. I did not know his story. I'll give you mine, and you can see the comparison here. When I first got sheriff, your first year in office, man, you want to make that big boom. You're trying to get new things going. You're trying to make, I'm here to do things. So I said, I'm going to go to this 287G program. That sounds like a good thing. I've got some illegals in my deal. Well, at that time, and I think it's still the case, your ICE and Customs district is actually under the New Orleans field office. That's the field office that you got to go to. So I finally called over there and got in touch with the guy and said, hey, I'm Sheriff Mack in Baldwin County. Yeah, I'm familiar with Baldwin County and all like this. We talked for a while. I said, man, I want to get involved in this 287G program. He said, Sheriff, do not do it. He said, whatever you do not do it. He said, it is a total waste of your time. And the reason is, under the Alabama law, it's still stipulated there, even with all this going on, we still don't determine the fact. It takes a federal agent to determine the fact of whether you're a legal or an illegal. Okay? That's still under that. Well, what happens is, and I've talked to some of the troopers that participated in this, to go through that whole interview process and everything is about 4 hours. So you're going to spend about 4 hours with that one individual to go through that interview process to make that determination. And then still, just like Sheriff Cochran said, you're relying on the federal database to come back and all those things. So upon his advice, I didn't do it. And now the program, I virtually say I don't know of hardly any troopers that I don't know if any of them still doing it. And the majority of them have either left or retired now that were once certified. So now I can't, it's been years since we've had a trooper in our facility on 287G. They actually had an office in my county. They at one time actually leased the old rest area on 31, which is now owned by the state of Alabama. But that was actually the 287G spot, is what they called it. That's where they would bring them over to. They would set them down, do the interviews and everything, and then bring them to my jail if they wanted the detention. Ride by it now and look at the 7-foot tall grass around it, and you can see how much it's being used.
Any other questions? This is going to fascinate you.
Do y'all have any statistics on how many percentage-wise of the folks that are sent up and there are actually immigration hearings held, or the ones like you said that voluntarily say I'm illegal?
No mas.
Yeah, that are actually deported. Do y'all get any of that feedback from the feds?
I don't know actual deportation.
No, when we speak to some of them, a lot of them, they just let them sign their sort of bond in New Orleans or something and tell them find your way back to Mexico or whatever. Just let them on their own, And it's kind of
That's kind of what I've heard from some of the ICE agents.
And see, and somebody says, well, why do they surrender and go back? Because they can get back that easy. That's the thing. The border's not secure. So they're going to take a trip. They're going to go back to Mexico. We have literally, I know of one case that we literally knew. We had a guy back in the county 6 weeks later.
Yeah, they said it's not a crime. I was surprised. It is not a crime under federal law for an illegal, unauthorized alien to be in the country. they consider a civil removal process. They detain them and they restrict their freedom. The federal government has the authority to, and oftentimes, like I said, they'll issue a summons to appear at their hearing where they're kind of, if they feel that they're a flight risk, or if they're committed a violent felony, or for other grounds. But oftentimes, they're just given a summons to come to their hearing, where they have a hearing, and if they found that they're, I guess, probable cause, I don't know what the standard is, if they found it here illegally, they issue a federal warrant, and that removal, and then they just let them go.
Then they say if they have a finding where they actually find them here illegally, they don't voluntarily go back. Then they've got to find if they go back, they come back again, now they've committed a criminal offense. But you can go back voluntarily a dozen times and you've never committed a criminal offense. Right. So they know that, they even advise them, if you go back voluntarily, this won't be on your record, so to speak. But if we find you as being here illegally, then you've been found kind of guilty, and if you come back again, you have to face a federal crime.
Well, do you think that's played any role in what the president said and what the sound clips Matt played, that the numbers of deportations are actually up? Well, certainly if they realize I'm not going to be charged criminally if I voluntarily
It's a
go
good
back.
point. They're artificially high.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah, because we get people, all the time that, most of the time, I mean, we haven't encountered the drug issues, of course, are there, but, most of the ones that we were arresting were misdemeanor offenses. And so that's
DUIs a lot in our court.
Yeah, DUIs, public intox, big one.
Yeah.
Public intox, things of that nature. And then what they would do is they would, just like what Matt said, they would come in, do the interview, and then they would take their information. Well, they bond out on the DUI, they go to court or whatever, they handle that DUI. They just set them up for a deportation hearing, and then only if they don't show up for that hearing, essentially they issue what's equivalent to an alias, and an alias writ, and then then they would go out and pick them up.
Very interesting. Any other questions? Well, please join me in thanking both our sheriffs.